All right. Well, good morning, everybody. How many of you were here last year when we did our best to address this topic? So, well, good. I'm glad you came back, and bear with us. Be flexible today. We're trying some different things, so we'll see how this goes. But anyway, so we're going to talk about reducing racial and ethnic inequities in breastfeeding. As Ingrid said, these are approved for contact hours, so we have to have a disclosure slide. You guys know me. I'm Becky Mantle. I'm director of the Oklahoma Breastfeeding Resource Center here on the Health Science Center campus. And Ingrid works with me as our assistant director. And so racial bias. How many of you think we have a problem with this? How many of you think, no, not really? I think we need to get over this. So, well, good. We do still have a problem with this. And one of the things I think you'll hear about today is implicit bias. We may think as individuals that we do our best to be fair and impartial and unbiased and certainly not racially biased. We would be appalled to think, especially in the healthcare system, that we might, act that way. But are there systems in place that still tend to allow that, encourage that, create barriers? So those are some of the things that we're going to hear about today. I don't know how many of you were here in Oklahoma, which was formerly Indian Territory, Trail of Tears. This is a picture from the early 1900s, and when many Native American children were forcibly removed from their homes to be made civilized and sent off to schools. They were taken as babies and young children, and of course they weren't educated very well either. So when you have a history of trauma like that, that goes through generations, as one of our speakers last year talked about. So, well, I found this very interesting. This was a study looking at just the language that we use and the images that are out there, and just in words. And the word black was most frequently paired with a lot of negative connotations. The word white was usually more positively associated. So plant that little seed and now start taking a look at things that you read and see if you see that yourself. And is that something, that we can address? And when we talk about our issue today of breastfeeding, and we often talk about, well, it is a choice for the mother to make, and I say all the time, we're not here to make mothers breastfeed, but we are here to make breastfeeding an option, a more feasible choice for mothers, and help mothers be successful. But how many mothers really feel that it's not a choice for them? We think we have choices, but many of the mothers that we work with actually do not. So, well, a few slides here from this organization 0 to 3 to tell us a little bit about our babies. Nearly half of our babies live in poverty. So how is breastfeeding a choice for you when you're barely above the poverty line and you have a job that has no paid sick days, no paid time off, and people wonder, why don't you take care of your health and why don't you go to the doctor? Because I can't afford to lose a day of pay. And we know that affects brain growth in our young children. And we see this at very young ages. And doesn't this draw a picture even more clearly of how important breastfeeding is for these families? Not only for everyone, but particularly for families that are in under-resourced areas. So, well, how are we doing here in Oklahoma? Once again, not very well. We rank 39th in the state, status of our children, and we have more than half of our infants and toddlers that are either below the poverty line or just barely above it. So, well, infant mortality rate. So a few slides on this just to show us that this is a problem. We know a lot of the work that we're doing statewide for improving breastfeeding outcomes is a part of the health department's Preparing for a Lifetime initiative to reduce infant mortality. So this was a slide just kind of to show you the graph of how we continue. We've been sort of making some progress, but not as much as we'd like to see. And we are still definitely above the national average. But take a look at this slide. This is the most recent data we have from the health department and averaged over the past 3 years. In some of the racial groups, the numbers may be too small to really get a good trend from year to year. So who's winning this race? That's not a race we want to be. That's not a race we want to be winning, is it? So 14 babies of color per 1,000 births die in their first year of life, do not live to have that first really cool birthday celebration. More for the family, that first birthday party, isn't it, than the baby. Instead, they're going to a funeral. And if we just look here at Oklahoma County, we still have a high preterm birth rate. This is not necessarily by racial and ethnic group, but of course when we have a high percentage of preterm deliveries, those babies have a higher infant mortality rate, and certainly our multiple birth babies as well. So many risk factors there. And when we look at it by racial and ethnic group, what are some of the major causes of infant death? The ones that I've highlighted in purple are ones I think that we can impact through improving our breastfeeding outcomes. Those are definitely ones that are modifiable through increased breastfeeding rates. But you can study that for a minute. Of course, our preterm and low birth weight babies and sudden infant death syndrome, we see that in all categories. But, in some categories, in some racial and ethnic groups, it's going to be a different reason there. So just, I think, knowing what the risk factors may be for that particular patient population. And for the state health department to reduce infant mortality, these are the areas that they're targeting. Breastfeeding, of course. I didn't put that at the top of the list. I'm happy to say that was at the top of the health department's list. And but you can see it's not breastfeeding alone, obviously, but it's definitely a very important piece of this picture. So here's how we're doing with our breastfeeding rates across racial and ethnic groups. And this is data from the CDC. So this is not Oklahoma specific, but and this is numbers from 2015, so based on babies that were born in the year 2012. That's the most current numbers that we have. So study that for a minute. And where do you see some gaps? And this is something that everyone in this room can help turn these numbers around. You can see, once again, our lowest initiation. This is any breastfeeding at 6 months and breastfeeding at 12 months. So our African American babies and our American Indian, Alaska Native, and then our multiracial babies tend to have some of the lowest breastfeeding rates. So I'll kind of wrap this up with just a few quotes from, this was an article that was in the journal Breastfeeding Medicine, and Mr. Hansen is not a medical person. He is a lawyer and an economist. He is a vice president with the World Bank, and he actually wrote an article that was published in a breastfeeding journal, if you will, and but talked about the power of nutrition. So the gains from early childhood nutrition are forever, and to a large extent, many of them are free because they've come prepackaged. We know all about that. In the unbelievable intervention called breastfeeding. And this reduces inequity. Breastfeeding is a game changer for every baby. This ensures all children, whether they're from a rich country or a poor one, can get the best start and the start from a more even playing field. Natural, renewable food source, course, we know no cooking, no refrigeration, environmentally friendly, eco-friendly, win-win for the health of the mother. But he went on to say, it's a win-win. It helps ensure healthy brain development, longer school attendance, higher IQ. And the single most effective investment a country can make. That's pretty powerful from the World Bank to make a statement like that. And I loved this. If somebody invented breastfeeding today, they should win the Nobel Prize. So, all right. Well, I'm going to end here because this is Black History Month. And how many of you heard about this story in the past week or two? And these two gentlemen were actually here in Oklahoma City last weekend to talk at Oklahoma, at OCU. And I saw this picture and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm old enough. I saw that on TV. I was a little girl and I was already an avid Olympics fan. And of course we didn't have DVRs and all of that kind of stuff and cable, and you had to be in front of the TV at the right time or you missed it and you regretted it forever. But I love the track and field. I mean, I'm a runner myself, not fast, but anyway. But I remember seeing these guys as a young girl up there, and I always wanted to see when they got their medals, and I always wanted to see the Star-Spangled Banner and see our people, our athletes up there being so honored and representing our country. And in my family, when we saw this, with what our perception was at the time, we were absolutely appalled. Now, I was a little girl, so of course I'm influenced by my parents, and I'm like, how could they do that? How could they stand up there and so disrespect the national anthem? My, how things changed. My, how the spin at the time was so negative. They weren't trying to be black radicals and black Panthers and that sort. They saw this as a true humanitarian gesture. We had just passed the civil rights legislation. They stood up there with no shoes on their feet while they got their gold medals to represent all of their black colleagues, friends, neighbors, family members who lived in poverty and faced so many barriers. And they saw that as a humanitarian gesture. Well, the price they paid was to be sent home packing from the Olympics immediately, and they were banned from track and field for that, and very, very difficult struggles that they went through. They survived, of course, and so they came here to Oklahoma City to talk about that. And now we see things, at least I can see things in a completely different light. Boy, I wished we'd known that then. But it's taken decades for us to really appreciate that, I think. So now that's from my perspective. I'm going to end here and ask Danielle to come up. And as we, how's our time, Ingrid? Good. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes. And Danielle's going to set the stage for us with a story. Let's hear about what happens here in Oklahoma. So do you want just use, okay.
Good morning, everybody. Is this on?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. I have the pleasure of being the director for the Coba Baby Cafe. Basically, what we're going out is we're creating breastfeeding communities where they don't exist. We have a lot of moms, new moms that are coming in, trying to breastfeed. Will say that, well, I asked for the lactation consultant to come to my room, and she never shows up. If they call us, then we will go to the hospital to assist them. A lot of times they're getting ready. We have one of our cafes that are in a WIC clinic. And in the WIC clinic, sometimes we'll walk through and it's, are you breastfeeding? And we have this little look of confusion. And but it hurts. Okay, come back. We're here to help you. And then they come in and we're like, okay, let me give you some information. Let me tell you how to improve what's going on. And then all of a sudden they find out that breastfeeding does not have to be painful, even though they're trying to struggle through it. So we're really excited about that. Sherry's message is going to be a hard message. What I want you to really think about is not to be offended, but how can you change the course of what's going on? When mothers come in and they're confused about their care during their pregnancy, we have a problem. We have a lot of areas that we have community clinics. And I can't tell you how many come in and they're confused and they just say, Well, I had somebody who was seeing me, and then at 36 weeks, they wouldn't see me anymore because they were being transferred out because the community provider does not deliver. So on one hand, it's just a conversation. They should know. I understand that we may have a poster that's sitting there. Have a conversation. Do we know their reading level? Do we understand that they are comprehending? You can come here for your care, but at 36 weeks, we're going to take you to the hospital so that then they're prepared. I can imagine, I'm a mom of 6, and I could not imagine my care provider telling me at the last minute, oh, but you're not going to deliver with me. That sets the course for a lot of things. So we're passing around our COBA wristbands. There's twofold. One, there's information for you to share with your clients on how to get in contact with us. The second one is that you're walking away. I hope you can take something positive from what we do today, not, again, being offended, but how you can affect change because it's out there. Our mothers should not be losing their babies 3 to 1. We've had mothers come in. One young lady came in, and she received care. She was considered high risk. Her care provider did not transfer her out. He did not transfer out of his care to a special care provider until she was 8 months. 2 weeks later, her baby has died because her baby had something wrong with his heart, and they did not find that out until 8 months and a week. And then as they were waiting and preparing, she went into labor. That should not happen. The color of our skin should not determine the type of care that we get. Guys, we've got to do better. And I'm really glad that you're here. You being here gives me hope that you all are going to go out of here and help us change what's happening. So thanks.